what happens when you survive something absolutely unimaginable, but there's no one left to hear your story? What if the real trauma isn't what happened, but the silence that comes after? Well, today we're diving into a really powerful idea from the philosopher Slavoj Žižek. He argues that the truth of our deepest experiences hinges on something we just can't take for granted anymore: a guaranteed listener. So, to really get to the heart of the problem Žižek is talking about, he does something pretty interesting. He doesn't start with the actual horror of the trauma itself. Nope. He starts with what happens after you survive. And let me tell you, there's a really unsettling twist here. And this is just fascinating, right? The survivor's biggest fear, the most traumatic part, isn't a flashback to the camp. It's this dream of coming home and just being ignored. For Žižek, that's the real gut punch. The true trauma isn't just what happened to you. It's the nightmare that your story, your truth, has nowhere to go. And this leads us to this really deep paradox. You see, the true witnesses, the people who saw the absolute worst of it, well, they didn't make it. They can't tell their story. And the ones who did survive, they often find that nobody is really ready to hear it. So they're caught in this impossible position, right? They're speaking for the dead, but to an audience that just can't or won't listen. And believe me, this is not just some one-off thing. Žižek connects the dots here, from Primo Levi's nightmare to the heartbreaking stories of Bosnian war survivors who came home and found no one would listen. It all comes back to this deep, profound fear that what you went through was so awful, so beyond belief, that no one will ever accept it as truth. So this isn't about individuals being bad listeners. It's something much bigger, a crack in the very foundation of how we share our reality. Okay, so why does this breakdown happen? To get to the bottom of this, Žižek brings in a really key concept from the psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan. It's this idea of the big other. Just think about it for a second. When you talk, are you really just talking to the person in front of you? Or is there something else going on? We kind of assume there's this background system, right? Something that's going to understand our words and give them meaning. Well, that invisible background, that unspoken listener, that's the key to this whole thing. So this big other, it's basically the whole symbolic network we live in. You know, language, rules, social customs, the whole shebang. It's what guarantees our words will actually mean something. It's the silent authority we all just assume is there. But, and this is Žižek's huge radical point, in our modern world, especially when faced with extreme trauma, that big other is gone. It's collapsed. The guarantee is just not there anymore. And you can see this isn't just about trauma. It's a defining feature of modernity itself. Think about it. In the concentration camps, there was no higher power, no big other to appeal to for justice. In music, you have composers like Webern, who basically gave up on writing for some ideal listener in the future. He just accepted there might not be one. And then in literature, you've got Samuel Beckett, who wasn't writing for future critics like Joyce did. He was just writing into the void, with no guarantee anyone would get it. So what does that mean for us? If there's no big other, no guarantee, are we just doomed to a world without meaning? Well, not so fast. Žižek actually finds a way out, a different kind of redemption that comes from a really surprising place. He looks at another story from the camps, this one told by the writer Jorge Semprún. And in this story, right in the middle of all that horror, there's this image. An unforgettable image that offers a little flicker of something eternal. And it's not about words. It's not about finding some deep meaning. It's all about a raw physical moment. For Žižek, this moment is a piece of what he calls the real, with a capital R. The real is that raw, chaotic, brutal stuff of life that you just can't wrap up in a neat little story. It resists symbols. It's an unbearable moment, and its power, its eternity, isn't in some hidden meaning. It's right there in the pure physical image. So this is the crucial part, okay? The redemption isn't about finding a moral to the story or some deeper meaning. No, it comes straight from the surface of this frozen image, the two children holding hands. That image becomes eternal because it's stripped of all the comforting stories we might try to tell about it. And to really hammer this point home, Žižek makes this brilliant comparison to the end of the movie Thelma and Louise. Remember that? We see the car go over the cliff and the frame freezes, this perfect image of utopian escape. But what don't we get? We don't hear the crash. For Žižek, that silence actually weakens the whole thing. For an image to become truly part of the eternal real, it has to be tied to the brutal soundtrack of reality. The children's clasped hands are eternal because we can't separate them from the awful sound of the clubs. Okay, so where does all this leave us? I know, it sounds pretty bleak, right? A world with no guarantee of meaning? But here's the final twist. Žižek argues that this exact void, this emptiness, is actually the foundation for something totally unexpected, a radical new kind of freedom. And this is really the mind-bending part. That gap where the big other used to be, it's not a loss to be mourned. For Žižek, that void is the very space where our freedom exists. It's an open field where something truly new can be born, precisely because there's no script, no pre-written rules telling us what to do. So this is what it means to be modern, according to Žižek. We're all reading and writing at our own risk. We have to create meaning without a safety net. There's no higher authority that's going to come in and say, yep, your story is valid. It's all on us. We're completely responsible for the truths we tell and the worlds we create. And yeah, that's a heavy, heavy burden. But it's also a kind of profound freedom, isn't it? Which leaves us with one last really big question. If there's no ultimate referee, no big other to sign off on the meaning of our lives, well, the buck stops with us. So in this wide open space of freedom and risk, what stories are we going to be brave enough to tell?